Hey, what's going on? It's Joey Myers from the Hitting Performance Lab, and in this video we're going to answer a reader question. This was a coach who was coaching, I think it was 14U girls, and was having a hard time coming back from the layoff, from the off season, and having a lot of his girls lunging at the ball. Or my definition of lunging is not so much at landing if the hitter's weight is a little bit more forward, but if that weight continues or that center of gravity continues forward even during the swing itself. And that's what this coach was talking about. So his question was, how do I fix lunging, especially in a team atmosphere? There's a couple things. I've got a whiteboard just over the way here so you can see me glance up. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was a beanbag study. There was a group of, or a classroom of grade school students that were maybe 10, 11, 12 years old. They split the class into two groups. They had group one practice throwing beanbags into a bucket that was about 3 feet away from them. So they practiced throwing that beanbag into that bucket for 15 minutes, group one. Group two practiced throwing beanbags into two buckets. One bucket was 2 feet away, and the other bucket was slightly behind it at 4 feet away. So there was no 3-foot bucket, only a 2 and a 4. Both of those groups practiced throwing beanbags in their specific buckets for 15 minutes. At the end of that 15 minutes, they were tested on throwing beanbags into a bucket that was set at 3 feet away. So the same distance that the group one was using. Who do you think did better in the test? You might think group one, because that's what they were practicing, but it is a trick question because it was group two. Now why? Because group two had 2 frames of reference to pull from. They practiced on the 2 and the 4, no 3. So when the 3 came on the scene, all they had to do was think, well, if I could throw it a little bit more than 2, a little bit less than 4. So the purpose of this video is to talk about how, now we're going to use lunging as an example, but you can bring this to any hitting flaw out there and help fix it. Now it's not going to be instantaneous, just like learning to walk, watching a baby develop into a toddler. It takes time, it can take 3 weeks up to maybe 6 weeks for them to figure out how to walk, but they figure it out by trial and error, getting different reference points. If I step here, I fall. If I step here, I don't. I have more stability. So that's how we're going to attack this, and that's what this is all about. Now that study you can read in the book Make It Stick by Peter C. Brown. I highly recommend that book for sticky coaching. That book has a lot of gold nuggets in it when it comes to making your coaching sticky and how to help players. It doesn't have to be just the exceptional high learners, the ones that learn really quickly, or even it helps the ones on the other end of the spectrum, the ones that don't really learn that quickly or kind of below average on that point. But most 80% of the athletes you're going to come into contact with are the bell curve, are the average learners. So the average learners can learn things somewhat quickly. So next point I wanted to talk about is the idea when you do this stuff, when you do what we're going to talk about, you want your players to understand that it's process over performance. So what I oftentimes tell my hitters is, if you're working the process, so in this case we're talking about some of the things we're going to talk about is how to get our players not to lunge. So if you're working the process correctly, but you're swinging and missing in the beginning, that is okay, and that is an A swing. If for whatever reason you're not working the process correctly and you're hitting a fiery hole through the net, that is an F swing in the beginning. I make sure I tell my players it's clear on what I'm grading them on. I'm grading them on to work the process, because it's just like if I asked you to write your first and last name in half the letters. So basically you're writing every other letter. If I asked you to do that, chances are you've never done that before. So in the beginning you're going to be a lot slower than if you get to about 10 repetitions down the line of writing your name in half the letters. At that point, you're actually going to write your name in half the letters in a third the time it takes you to write your full name. And it makes sense because it's half the letters, but in the beginning you've never done it before. So that's just like with learning a new skill, be it hitting, is that in the beginning new processes or new movements that we're learning are going to take longer to get in the beginning. So the performance isn't going to be there, but the performance, like I tell my hitters, the performance is going to catch up. So we talk about this idea of variance, using variance. And it's also, you have to keep in mind that there is this, when you put effort in, it takes time and practice to do this. Now it takes time to change momentum. You have momentum, you have a player's momentum going in one direction, and you're trying to change that with new movement. It's going to take a while. They're going to skid out for a little bit before their car starts to catch the tires, catch and grab the ground and start to go the direction that we want to go. So that's why we want to focus on more process versus performance. So when it comes to lunging, what I told this coach, and I laid it out in probably 5 or 6 bullet points, is this idea of using a point on the body. It could be a nose, because we're very good with where the nose goes, or the belly button. Belly button is our center of gravity. And if you take the center of gravity, or you take the belly button and then you put a line, draw a line through the side of the body, and where those two lines intersect, belly button, side of the body, where those points intersect, that's our center of mass. And it's the same for, pretty much the same for both males and females. So I like to use that because at least we're moving our body differently. So the belly button. So what we could say is we want them to practice both sides of the extreme and then a little bit in the middle. We're going to try and get to the middle point. Now I like to get my hitters to maybe a 55-45 at landing, 55% on the front leg, 45 on the back, or even slightly even closer towards the middle. But what we want them to do is we want them to practice all the way to the end. So extreme lunge. And then we want to get them to the other side, which is, a lot of coaches teach sit back. So the belly button staying almost in line over the back knee. So what you could do is, say a 5-swing round, or just getting them to just landing, they don't even need to take a swing, is the first swing you can have them get their belly button out over their front toe. The next repetition, stride repetitions, you can have them keep their belly button over their back toe as they stride. So basically it would look like they're kind of like staying back, but their front foot's going out in front of them. The next one, you can maybe get them in the middle. So say, all right, so I want you to stride, but I want you to keep your belly button behind your front knee. So then when they get that, then the fourth one, so we got 4 and 5, so we got 5 total reps in this round. So the next one we could say, okay, so we're kind of filling in the middle now. We could say, okay, I want your belly button now at stride to end up inside your back knee. And then the last one you can do is see if you can get them to be 50-50. So get them to have their belly button split their knees. So be exactly, at landing, their belly button is exactly in the middle of both knees. So the distance between their belly button, if you drew a line straight down into the ground at landing, and you measure the distance between both knees, that it would be the same. Now in a game, we're going to want it somewhere there, maybe slightly forward, because we want to shift our weight from back to forward. We do want to shift our weight. We don't want to keep it back, and we don't want too much going forward, although that is going to happen when hitters are out in front. So there are certain things that we teach to make sure that are kind of barriers or defense mechanisms against being out in front. But we want them to get different frames of references. Go back to that beanbag study. The group that had 2 frames of references throwing into the 2-foot bucket and the 4-foot bucket did better practicing for 15 minutes than the group that was practicing throwing into the 3-foot bucket. They did better when they were tested on the 3-foot bucket, the one group that was actually working on that one for 15 minutes. The group that had the 2 frames of references did better. So we want to take that same concept of variance, creating more frames of reference of movement for them to get that. Now, this, again, like I said from the beginning, this isn't just for lunging. This is for everything. I do this for showing numbers. I do this for hiding hands. I do this for down shoulder angle. I do this for everything that I teach. The more variables we give them, or the more frames of reference we give them, the better chance is, what I find, the better chances they have to get where I want them. And I'll tell them where I want them, but I need them to feel over here, and then we're going to feel a couple in the middle, and I'm going to get you about right here. So I hope that made sense for this video. I hope this helps you coaches out there to take whatever concept, whatever principle, human movement principle that you're working with, and be able to take this frame and practice whatever it is that you want to practice. Make sure that we're swinging smarter by moving better. And before I let you go, did you know
It's possible to become the top 5% of coaches in 6 months. You know how frustrating it is taking the time to pick and choose the most effective coaching strategies that actually work. You may also have fears that the coaching strategies you're currently following are not validated by science. It's also a possibility you have a hopeless feeling because nothing else has worked up until now. And lastly, you may be holding a little envy for other coaches who seem to be getting their troops to cleanly execute on the field. I've discovered some of these same thoughts and more from the parents of the hitters I teach both online and off. It's a challenge for coaches, especially newer ones, but here's what I found. That it is possible to become the top 5% of coaches in 6 months when we're applying human social and psychological principles that are validated by science to coaching youth athletes. And that's why I wrote The Science of Sticky Coaching, How to Turn Ordinary Athletes into Extraordinary book that is now available for purchase on Amazon.com. Now, once you've read the book, there are a few things that both baseball and softball parents or coaches will realize. A greater sense of confidence that your coaching strategy is the same one that's supported by top 5% of teachers, parents, and coaches. A bigger sense of relief that the coaching strategy you'll learn is validated by the gold standard of science, empirical research. A constant state of joy because your new coaching strategy will make mentally tough athletes focused on the controlled process and not uncontrollable outcomes. At Hit Perform Lab, just finished Science of Sticky Coaching book, and it should be required reading for all youth baseball coaches. Hashtag belt to hat at BCATS Baseball. Please click here to get your copy on Amazon today.